Hi there, I'm Andrew Smiley. I'm the director of TreeFolks, and I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you the story of TreeFolks. I'll share a little bit of the history, where we came from, our progression through the years, and all the different programs, projects we've been involved in, and then I'll share a little insight into our vision and where we're headed next. So, TreeFolks was founded by a group of friends who decided one winter solstice evening that they were going to save the world. And to save the world, they decided planting trees was something that they could do with their families and in their own communities. And so they did. They started planting trees in their yards, neighbors' yards, school yards, parks, libraries, medians. And as their effort grew and gained more attention, well, they started getting the attention of the Austin Independent School District and City of Austin government. Those two entities started supporting TreeFolks and really encouraging more tree planting. And TreeFolks continued to grow as a community tree planting organization. Of course, we couldn't plant all the trees ourselves, so we started giving away free trees to folks that they could plant in their own yards. And, planting trees is only part of it. So we developed educational programming to teach people about how to plant trees properly and also how to care for trees so that they survive long term and become part of our urban canopy to sequester carbon, to generate oxygen, to help filter rainwater, to provide wildlife habitat, and even in some cases to provide food for humans. In fact, pecans are one of my favorite trees. I don't have one single favorite. I like them all, but pecans are right up there near the top. So that was our core function for 20 years or so, was working in the city center in Austin to plant trees, to distribute trees, and to teach people how to care for trees. Of course, it's not all about the trees, it's also about the folks, right? Tree folks. So none of this work would have happened without all of the committed volunteers over the years, all the community members, all the community leaders who joined forces to help get those trees distributed, to help plant the trees and to teach others about trees. So the folks are just as important as the trees in our work. I mentioned that was our work for 30 years, up until 2011, when we were asked to come down to Bastrop and help lead the reforestation effort following the Bastrop wildfire. So one reason that we were asked to come down and help lead the reforestation effort after the Bastrop wildfires that destroyed a huge section of the Lost Pines region was because we knew trees, obviously. But the other part was because we could mobilize volunteers. And at that time, it was really important to engage the community in the healing process following that disaster. So over the years, we've planted a little over 2 million loblolly pines in that region. And even today, we continue to distribute pines to landowners to maintain the reforestation and to replace trees that may have died in, for example, the recent freeze or drought. So we are still committed to that effort in Bastrop to restore that critical ecosystem. It was a few years later when we were called again after a major disaster to support the reforestation effort along the Blanco River, this time after the floods of 2015. So as a result of the 2015 floods along the Blanco River, folks in Wimberley and surrounding areas suffered property loss, tree damage of course, but especially sensitive was the loss of life there. So TreeFolks again was asked to come and help with the reforestation with our tree knowledge, with our ability to really involve the community in that healing process, but also to incorporate educational programming to ensure that landowners knew the importance of trees along their river. Trees help prevent erosion along creek banks, and they can help slow down and intercept floodwaters. And it's that rapid moving water that really is destructive for trees. So the educational work, the tree planting, and the community volunteering continued to be a core function of TreeFolks, even though we were now working in Austin and outside of Austin. So today our core programming remains planting trees in the community, distributing trees to residents here in Austin, teaching people about trees, And we're still involved in large-scale reforestation work. Only this time we're taking a proactive approach. Our reforestation program is no longer really designed as a post-disaster tree planting. Instead, we're mitigating the impact of climate change before we feel the worst of it. That is, planting trees on a large scale in hundreds of acres around a 6-county region surrounding Austin. So this regional approach results in floodplains planted with trees that create habitat, that sequester carbon, that also help prevent erosion and help intercept and slow down those floodwaters. And besides, they really are part of the beautiful landscape. So all of those elements of trees come together in our reforestation program, where we also sequester carbon credit, or regenerate carbon credits through the Carbon Plus Credits program. We trade those credits with the City of Austin and with other entities to help with their zero carbon goals. So our core work remains: giving away trees, planting trees, teaching people about trees, and we're doing it not only on a focused small scale here in the city, but also really large scale outside the city. The future of our work will really involve addressing equity and social justice when it comes to tree canopy cover and when it comes to addressing climate change. We know that folks who are of lower means and lower income are more susceptible to the impact of climate change. Without the resources to evacuate before a disaster, or really resources to recover after a disaster, you can see how some of our neighbors can really feel the impacts more than others. So it is important for us to work within communities to hear from neighbors what is important to them when it comes to trees. How can TreeFolks work help our neighbors reach their own goals when it comes to tree planting and climate change resilience? So we'll continue that work as a focused effort in the city, while at the same time maintaining our regional approach to rebuilding our forest around Austin and protecting our critical floodplains and riparian zones. That is the future for our work. We will continue planting trees, giving away trees, educating people about trees, and we'll continue mobilizing volunteers and engaging with community to accomplish our mission. And that mission, which hasn't changed much over the years, is still to empower Central Texans to build stronger communities through planting and caring for trees. So thank you for letting me share a little bit of information about TreeFolks. You can always find us online, treefolks.org, and we have a pretty strong presence on social media, so you can find us there, or just give us a holler anytime. We'd love to sit down and talk with you, or even bring you out to some of our project sites so you can see our work in action and even take part in it and plant some trees yourself. So thank you again.
Hello, my name is Colin McMichael, and I'm the Education Coordinator here at TreeFolks. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Austin's urban forest. TreeFolks is Austin's only nonprofit dedicated to preserving the urban forest, and we run programming throughout the planting season to meet that goal. Planting season in Central Texas is October 1st to March 31st, so check out www.treefolks.org/events during those dates to find out how you can help too. TreeFolks offers volunteer reforestation, volunteer tree planting, education, and other opportunities. Today we will be discussing what an urban forest actually is and how the trees in it work as a type of green infrastructure. From there, we will discuss a few of the common trees we see in Austin's urban forest and the benefits we get from each of them specifically. And lastly, we will conclude with a brief discussion of the benefits of tree diversity in our urban forest. So what is an urban forest? Well, if a forest is a collection of trees, an urban forest would be the collection of trees within the confines of an urban area. Essentially, it's the trees in a city. Urban forests are different than traditional forests. The trees are farther apart, they grow in human-altered environments, they're exposed to more pollutants, and they impact human daily life in a surprising number of ways. Humans and trees really have the same requirements. This might be something to do with the fact that humans evolved as a forest edge specialist ape, but it has resulted in human settlements throughout what is considered the forest belt of the United States. This is direct competition for space between trees and humans. So what would happen if we tried to encourage the trees and forests to return to our urban centers? What if instead of competing for space, we started living in a type of symbiosis with trees where we both benefit? Living trees in the ground provide a host of ecosystem services that make life around them easier. These services are often referred to as co-benefits of tree planting, and people have only begun to understand how much they affect every aspect of our lives. Unfortunately, these effects are not felt evenly across the population. Affluent Americans routinely get more than their fair share of the ecosystem services provided by these trees, since their neighborhoods tend to be more heavily canopied. Conversely, more underprivileged populations see fewer of the co-benefits that would actually help them, like fewer health problems, lower energy bills, and less stress, because they live in less treed areas. Addressing these concerns is referred to as environmental equity and is a major part of what TreeFolks does. Especially in Austin, there is a strong dichotomy between East and West, both in socioeconomic metrics and tree canopy coverage. That means the wealthier population to the west has more canopy, and the less affluent population to the east has less. This results in an impressive need for programs to address environmental equity concerns in Austin, something that TreeFolks is proud to say we do. Interestingly, Austin's urban forest is actually multiple different forests mashed together. The west side, that was mentioned previously, is the Edwards Plateau ecoregion of scraggly oak-dominated forest underlain with limestone. To the east, you find the Blackland Prairie ecoregion, which holds a patchwork of grasslands and riparian forests that have historically been utilized as farmlands. Some species overlap in both of these ecoregions, but there's a sharp divide in the types of forests seen in either place, making Austin's greenery especially unique. As I mentioned, trees make urban life easier. They do this through what we call ecosystem services, and that's what makes them green infrastructure. Ecosystem services can be pretty much anything a tree does, from sequestering carbon to things much less easy to quantify. And because these things make our lives easier in urban areas, that makes them infrastructure. The canopy of a tree slows rainfall and prevents runoff. The roots allow this slowed rainfall to better infiltrate the soil. The leaves and roots clean the air and water respectively. The leaves and branches obscure sightlines and noise. The products that trees make feed, shelter, and entertain us. Between windbreaks and shade, trees save homeowners millions of dollars annually. Also, the trunks of trees can slow cars, and that's not even an off-color joke. There is evidence that the vertical structures like tree trunks or telephone poles passing to the side of vehicles cause people to drive more slowly. But this isn't the end of the list when it comes to the benefits of trees, though. Trees actually provide so many benefits that the trees themselves can be considered a type of green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is any natural system used to improve city life, like rain gardens or planted roofs. Trees are one of the most versatile of the things that can be called green infrastructure. Trees physically alter the environment around us, but that results in real-world benefits. The temperature reductions mentioned on the last slide and the shade that they cast can reduce cooling costs for houses in town. Windbreaks can reduce heating costs. Green textures can increase the feeling of well-being in people, and on top of improving their health outcomes. Attracted wildlife also enriches our lives. And all of this makes us want to be outside more. Plus, don't forget the bounty of nuts and fruits produced by trees annually. Trees really do make our lives better in countless ways. I would like to apologize for my shaky voice for a second, because there is a spider that has taken up residence on my microphone and decided to build a web between the microphone and my face. So, yeah. That's where we are in this talk. Moving on. So a lot of people are probably going to laugh that on the last slide I ended with trees make our lives better in countless ways, and then the next slide there's nothing less than a freaking cedar tree. As a sufferer of cedar fever, I feel your pain, but I have to admit these trees are amazing. First of all, cedars aren't cedars. A true cedar is in the genus Cedrus, and they are related to pine trees. Texas's cedars are in the genus Juniperus, making them junipers, and they are more closely related to the giant sequoia than pine trees. The most commonly encountered juniper in Austin, and actually the most commonly encountered tree in Austin, period, is the ash juniper, Juniperus ashii. Austin is actually the easternmost extent of their range. Everything that gets called cedar east of here is its sister species, the eastern red cedar. Another juniper, but by the Latin name of Juniperus virginiana. Ash junipers are evergreen with small leaves that clasp the branches in adults. Juveniles and stressed trees display prickly blue-green, awl-shaped foliage. The trees come in males and females, with males turning golden in December due to pollen load. The cones produced by the females are blue and fleshy, resembling berries. They are enjoyed by birds such as the cedar waxwing. The bark is reddish-orange and dehiscent, coming off in strips. The branches start low and often come out in less than 90-degree angles to the trunk. Ash junipers have been erroneously labeled as invasive for decades, if not centuries. But they are in fact native trees essential to the proper function of Texas's ecosystems. Several native endangered songbirds require them for reproduction, such as the golden cheek warbler. Despite this, junipers are maligned and removed from the landscape with abandon. Junipers were traditionally restricted to the northern slopes of hills by anthropogenic fires before Europeans arrived in Texas. After cattle were introduced, they became much more common. The non-native cattle preferentially consume hardwood saplings, leaving the prickly junipers to regenerate in their stead. Junipers often do need to be managed due to this and their nature as a pioneer species, but ultimately, humans need to find a new equilibrium with junipers instead of attempting elimination. Ash junipers are extremely drought tolerant when allowed to grow in groups, but single junipers can struggle in dry conditions. Their dense canopy does not allow for much undergrowth, which suppresses fires. The dense canopy also has incredible amounts of surface area that allow for greater pollution, runoff, and sound reductions than most other trees. The berries themselves are edible and have been used as a spice for millennia. The next most common tree after the ash juniper also causes a fair amount of allergies, the cedar or fall elm. Cedar elms have the Latin name Ulmus crassifolia, which means thick, coarse-leafed elm, which is a direct reference to their small cat-tongue textured leaves. These trees are incredibly common and incredibly productive when it comes to their wind-borne seeds, resulting in cedar elms just about everywhere there is fallow dirt. Cedar elms are easily identified by the coarse, light-colored bark and small leaves with slightly unequal bases. The branch architecture is distinct, with branches often curling under themselves, creating a canopy shaped like an upside-down basket. These trees get a brilliant gold fall color before losing their leaves. Cedar elms are especially drought tolerant, making them an excellent choice for a shade tree. Their especially narrow profile also allows for easy fitting into urban landscapes, and their tolerance of basic soil means they have no qualms about concrete. The tiny leaves and extreme ramification or twigginess of the branches increases surface area for better pollution, runoff, and sound reductions. The coarse bark can also store copious amounts of water. And the seeds of cedar elms are edible. The papery samara can be removed, and if you're a wildlife like squirrels, just eat it whole. And finally, the wood is strong and burns with an intense heat. The third most common tree, and often many people's favorite tree, is the live oak. Live oaks are great. They're evergreen, spreading shade trees, which is especially important since warm winters are becoming more commonplace. Plus, they produce acorns, which attracts wildlife from miles around. Interestingly, we actually have two species of live oaks, and they're hybrid that occur in the area. The most common live oaks are likely the hybrids of the plateau and southern live oaks. Southern live oaks are the traditional trees associated with the southeastern United States, often pictured dripping with Spanish moss. Their population extends up the Colorado River Valley to Austin from the Gulf Coast. The plateau live oak is a bit more upright and often covered in ball moss, but otherwise hard to tell apart except that it has much narrower, pointier acorns. Their population starts in Mexico, skips South Texas, and then has a major population center here in Central Texas, in the hill country with a bit of tapering off up into Oklahoma. The hybrid is intermediate between the two and can be found in and around Austin, and ball moss and Spanish moss also hybridize too, so you can actually find a hybrid tree with hybrid epiphytes, which is pretty neat if you're a population geneticist. Anyway, both species and the hybrid of them have similar enough characteristics that it's pretty hard to discuss their benefits by parsing them out. The wildlife attracted to these trees stand to be mentioned twice. The acorns are actually edible to people too, with proper processing. The shiny evergreen leaves do wonders at blocking sightlines and noise pollution. The coarse bark on the leaves capture runoff, and the spreading, dense canopy casts shades that cools even the hottest summer days. Thanks to the genetics of the plateau live oak, Austin's live oaks are surprisingly drought tolerant. Live oaks are especially long-lived, with specimens known over 400 years. So in an urban forest, people need to plant trees to ensure the trees remain. And when you're planting trees, we are doing so to ensure their ecosystem services remain in the environment, so why not focus on trying to mimic the forest with the best return on investment for ecosystem services? Old growth forests. Old growth is characterized by species diversity, lots of layers, dense vegetation, and uneven age classes. You can try to mimic this through things like using the 30-20-10 rule when planting, underplanting and doing selective harvests, and also accelerated successional plantings. The 30-20-10 rule simply states that when you are planting, no more than 30% of what you plant should come from one family, 20% from one genus, and 10% from one species. This ensures proper genetic diversity in the resulting planting project to bolster the resiliency of the resulting ecosystem. This can be very difficult to accomplish here in Central Texas because the vast majority of our trees are oaks. North America has an incredible diversity of oaks, and they are overrepresented in Texas's forests. Still, we should strive to follow this rule because oaks interact oddly when placed close to each other. Since our forests are oak-dominated, selective harvest and underplanting can increase diversity of layers in the forest. Smaller understory trees provide many ecosystem services, and layering canopy levels accelerates the effects of the ecosystem services provided. But back to oaks for a second. One of the reasons we are concerned that live oaks make up such a large portion of our urban forest is because there is a current disease spreading through many of our oaks called oak wilt. This is a fungal pathogen that is spread from tree to tree by a beetle seeking sap. Red oaks are the causal agent in the spread of oak wilt, in that a dying red oak will produce spores that the beetles feed on and then spread to white oaks or other red oaks. When the disease gets to a white oak like live oaks, instead of killing it in a matter of weeks like the red oak, it slowly succumbs to the infection. Often the progress is so slow that the disease is able to travel from the above ground tissue to the roots, where it begins to infect nearby trees through root grafts. All white oaks can graft roots together, but live oaks do it most commonly. Live oaks generally graft to other live oaks and red oaks, where white oaks generally only graft to their own species, or occasionally other white oaks. This creates a situation where when you have a forest of live oaks that sees one tree infected, the entire forest can die in a matter of years. Oak wilt can travel at least 100 to 150 feet annually through the roots, causing a spreading patch of death originating at the initially infected tree. Oak wilt is easily managed, though. With proper pruning practice, oak wilt transmission can be nearly eliminated. Oak should not be pruned between January and June unless you absolutely have to. Whenever you prune an oak, you need to paint your cuts with a simple can of spray paint. Avoid anything labeled wound sealant for trees because this is actually a bad product that can harm your tree. And with that, you now know the basics of Austin's urban forest. If you would like to learn more, you should continue your journey through our online UFS course, and don't forget to email education@treefolks.org if you have any questions. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Becky Woodward. I am the Tree Distribution and Procurement Coordinator at TreeFolks, and one of my primary roles is overseeing and implementing our NeighborWoods program. Our NeighborWoods program has been around since the 80s, and it's a partnership between TreeFolks, the City of Austin, and Austin Energy. With this program, we distribute 4,500 free trees to Austinites every year. They're 5-gallon trees, usually about 3 to 6 feet tall. The goal of this program is to decrease the urban heat island effect, and we do this by increasing the urban canopy. Obviously, because we are trying to decrease the urban heat island effect, we are going to be prioritizing shade trees. I have a personal goal of at least distributing 50% shade trees. We do also give away some understory trees and some fruit trees. An analysis was done of our NeighborWoods program, well, of the trees that were distributed through the NeighborWoods program from 2002 to 2014, and found that over 5 million kilowatt hours of energy was saved from the shade, and it reduced over 27 million pounds of carbon dioxide, and that was 43,000 trees distributed as of May 2015. A note about the urban heat island effect is that so what the urban heat island effect is where you have clusters of people living, you have a lot of concrete or impervious cover. And that concrete doesn't just reflect the sunlight and the heat rays, it actually absorbs it. So oftentimes in areas where there's not a lot of concrete, you will have cooling at night, but in urban areas covered in concrete, it still stays pretty warm. So this is an urban heat island map of Austin. So you'll see this is downtown, and here is the heat map. And so you can see that instead of it being an island, it's more of an archipelago. You have pockets of cooler temperatures and then a lot hotter temperatures. And you can see that this is the river. It is a lot cooler. Here's the domain at 183 in Mopac. And again, you see over here at Pioneer Hill, looks like there's some natural area, probably some trees, reduced temperatures, and then you see the domain is just really hot. And then Hornsby Bend over here where TreeFolks is, along the Colorado River, you can see, wow, okay, water does a good thing for surface temperatures, obviously, but you see little pockets of heat. And so that's what we're trying to cool. So there are many benefits of increasing the urban canopy. First of all, it decreases the surface temperature, it can lower utility costs, and it can decrease the atmospheric carbon that's in the air. It also mitigates the negative effects of climate change. A recent study was published by that came out of the University of Wisconsin that showed that once you have 40% canopy cover, you can actually decrease your temperatures by as much as 10 degrees. So they kind of found this threshold kind of canopy cover percentage where once you cross that, then you have all these great benefits. And it's been linked to decreasing negative health impacts. So the health of your community is also going to increase, and even the mental health as well. This is the community tree prioritization map created by the City of Austin. We use this with our NeighborWoods program to distribute trees to the high and highest priority areas. This map was created based on census data, and it evaluates the vulnerability to climate change based on things like tree canopy, surface temperature, flooding potential, air pollution, poverty level, education levels, mental health, and numerous other factors. And so we use this to help influence us and decide where we're going to put these trees.
Hello, my name is Colin McMichael, and I'm the Education Coordinator at TreeFolks. Today I'm going to be talking to you about our carbon credit generation. TreeFolks produces carbon credits to help offset carbon footprints across Central Texas. Today I'm going to be giving a very light overview on climate change and the carbon economy, and that's going to be followed by more information on city forest credits, Carbon Plus credit that TreeFolks produces through the Central Texas Floodplain Reforestation program, and finally we'll wrap it up with a brief discussion of the state of carbon neutrality in Central Texas. So to get started, you first have to understand the basics of anthropogenic climate change. Anthropogenic just means caused by people, and climate change as a phrase is relatively straightforward. The climate is changing. But how? Since the Industrial Revolution, people have been burning fuel on, well, an industrial scale. Burning fuel like wood, coal, oil, or gas releases CO2 into the atmosphere. With increasing CO2 levels in the atmosphere, the sun's energy doesn't escape into space as with lower levels, resulting in a buildup of solar energy. Energy is synonymous with heat in this scenario, so on a whole, the Earth's atmosphere is heating up. This can cause chaotic weather because more energy in a system creates larger temperature swings, stronger winds, and more rain. Now that we have been burning fuel for energy for a while, we are beginning to see the effects of climate change through larger tornadoes, wetter hurricanes, and stronger winter storms. People have begun to take notice, and there are efforts underway to address these issues, namely the buying and selling of carbon credits, or the so-called carbon economy. The carbon economy is a system that attempts to keep any more carbon from entering the atmosphere. Honestly, if enough people reduced carbon, they could potentially reduce carbon from the atmosphere, but no one is really currently that ambitious with carbon credits. Getting people to stop producing excess carbon is really step one here. The way the carbon economy works is that there are actions that produce carbon, generally things that burn fuel, and actions that reduce carbon, generally things that allow plants to grow or actively remove carbon from power plant smokestacks. The idea is that these things should balance out if we don't want to worsen climate change. To do that, carbon producers track the amount of carbon that they produce. This is their carbon footprint. Carbon reducers also track the carbon, but the amount of carbon they reduce or remove from the atmosphere. These are their carbon credits. Carbon producers can then purchase carbon credits from carbon reducers, so the net carbon added or removed becomes zero. The reducers are then compensated for their work, and the producers can continue to emit carbon. But there is one group in the carbon economy that I failed to mention in the last slide, and that's the carbon registries. Carbon registries are basically independent organizations that verify and certify that carbon reductions have taken place. This is done through various means depending on the carbon reduction project. Registration of a carbon reduction project is what results in carbon credits getting issued to the carbon reducer. Carbon registries also often assist with the sale of carbon credits to carbon producers as well. TreeFolks specifically works with the carbon registry City Forest Credits. City Forest Credits is an amazing nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington. They only certify carbon reduction projects in urban areas, and to my knowledge are the only registry that does that. Most carbon reduction projects are done in rural areas, but doing them in urban areas allows for the co-benefits of these projects to be felt by more people. The carbon reduction project City Forest Credits registers are planting projects and preservation projects. They will register single trees, groups of trees, or large swaths of land that have been reforested, and ditto for preservation projects. City Forest Credits has based all their protocols on a very impressive set of scientific data and parametric equations. Essentially, scientists have modeled how trees grow and used these models to figure out how much carbon these trees are made of, how much pollution they reduce from the atmosphere, how much runoff they intercept, and how much money they save nearby people on heating and cooling costs. It is extremely technical on the back end, but on the user side, it's easy as plugging in some numbers to a spreadsheet and getting the quantities posted in a table. All in all, these additional built-in assessments, tacked on top of what was already a verified carbon credit, raises the value of Carbon Plus credits above what one would normally pay for carbon credits, by up to 1/3. And carbon producers really like them because they have demonstrable co-benefits with real-world effects. When TreeFolks found out about city forest credits and the Carbon Plus credits, we knew it was the right fit for us. We had an ongoing reforestation work in town and quickly developed a very small pilot program which eventually grew to be the Travis County Floodplain Reforestation Program after we secured grant funding from a Natural Climate Solutions Accelerator grant from the Nature Conservancy and the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. That program, the TCFRP, focused on eastern Travis County and was extremely effective. Now it has grown to encompass the surrounding 6-county area as Central Texas Floodplain Reforestation Program and generally reforests nearly 60 acres a year with native tree saplings. The vast majority of plantings are done by professional planting crews from Superior Forestry, but we do a fair number of volunteer-driven events as well. Each acre reforested gets registered with city forest credits and begins producing the 106.7 carbon credits we expect from it. These credits are forwarded because it takes 25 years to achieve that amount of sequestration. Forwarding credits allows for additional work. Because the credits get forwarded, the sites are under observation and scrutiny to make sure they continued growing as expected. This is generally carried out through aerial photographs, on-the-ground observations, and satellite imagery. Luckily, riparian land left fallow will naturally grow a forest here, so that is accepted as a given. TreeFolks, however, improves upon what would normally regenerate by adding more desirable, longer-lived hardwoods and forest obligates that take decades to recruit to the site. 25 years after a TreeFolks planting, a site will have a significantly higher diversity and resiliency than a 25-year-old fallow site. So how does this program actually work? Well, first the landowners have to sign up. It's as easy as going to our website and filling out a form. Once that happens, landowners get a complimentary consultation in which our reforestation team will meet with them on their site, discuss the ecological, hydrological, and project concerns. Afterwards, landowners sign the paperwork and the reforestation team is back a month or so later to survey and flag the site for planting. Once flagged, the planting crew comes in with curated saplings and plants them in the ground. Then, through sheer neglect and perseverance, the saplings grow and you get a forest. That does require a cessation of any land use practices that would prevent a forest, however, such as cattle grazing, mowing, or herbicide applications. At the end of the season, TreeFolks registers the projects with city forest credits and gets the first issuance of forwarded credits. And each one of those credits represents a single metric ton of carbon that's been reduced from the atmosphere. The credits generated are donated to TreeFolks by the landowners and as a part of the initial agreement for the work. Then TreeFolks sells the credits to the carbon producers and uses the profit to plant more trees. So carbon neutrality is a word on everyone's lips, and rightly so. It's really hard to be carbon neutral, especially for big entities and that do any transportation or construction or manufacturing. Honestly, TreeFolks cannot produce enough credits to meet demand. There just isn't enough land to reforest or enough trees to put in the ground. The city of Austin alone has an incredible carbon footprint. The city of Austin's Office of Sustainability does buy from TreeFolks, but we are only able to produce a drop when they need more, like a torrent. Local architecture firm DWG has also purchased credits from TreeFolks, and other groups like Austin International Airport and Circuit of the Americas have expressed interest as well. But to meet these demands, TreeFolks needs to be able to find new sources for saplings. We routinely buy out all suitable species in the state. But even down that avenue, TreeFolks is eyeing growth potential. Reforestation and carbon credit generation are two of the major programming aspects of TreeFolks and will continue to be so, hopefully, for many years to come. It's TreeFolks' dream that every creek feeding Austin will have a healthy riparian canopy and healthy waters. And that's all I have today on carbon credit generation, so if you have any questions, please email me at education@treefolks.org. And if you enjoyed this talk, please see the rest of our UFS programming online.